Do you think a documentary such as Crumb would have the same appeal as it did back in the 90s as it does now? Knowing that things have changed, anybody can have access to iMovie, 10-year-olds are teaching people on YouTube how to edit.
Crumb was a brilliant documentary. I wouldn't change one frame of Crumb if I released it today. The thing about any of these documentaries is it's about storytelling. I don't care how fast you cut or how you shoot it or what you shoot it on. Crumb was beautifully made, had told a great story, was well constructed, and that's another thing that people ask in these classes is, and that they need to understand, is that the essence of any of this is storytelling. It's not about all the other stuff is great and will have an impact on the film, but you have to be telling a compelling story. Crumb had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Absolutely fascinating characters, great lead character. So I wouldn't change one bit of Crumb, and I think it would be just as successful. And obviously, he went on to do feature films. He had the chops. He had the storytelling chops to go on and do feature films.
That being said, Kevin, what is a 3-act structure for a documentary film? Isn't that manipulating reality in some sense?
Yes and no. I mean, all storytelling. This was a lesson that I was taught one time. I was in a meeting with Peter Guber, and I was pitching a show, and I think he was preparing his book, Tell to Win, which is about what he calls the emotional transportation business. And his claim, and I think it's true, is that all entertainment, whether it's a documentary or a commercial or a feature film, dramatic film, the audience expects to be taken from one point when they walk in the theater or turn on the TV to another place and to a final place at the end. They want to go on a ride somewhere. And so all filmmakers, I think, owe it to their audience to tell some kind of story that has a beginning, middle, and an end. So whether you construct it consciously or not, when you think about it, all stories, whatever you do, the story of you coming over here to talk to me today, I mean, that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's just the way we do things. So I don't think you're constructing anything. If you're following a character and you meet them and you're doing this film for some reason, you find an interesting character and here's where they're at. Well, if you follow them for any length of time, you're going to see their life change, and maybe they're trying to get something when you meet them. And that's why you're interested in them in the beginning. So in Act 2, they're going to be trying to get that object. And perhaps at the end of 2, yes or no, they'll either get it or they'll come up against something that they might not be able to surmount. In Act 3, you're going to see whether they get it or not. In Border War, I had 5 main characters, and each of them had 3 acts. And this was just by being around them for a certain amount of time. There was a young woman I followed. She had lost her husband, who was a LA County deputy sheriff. He had pulled over a man on the freeway. The man shot him and killed him. He was an illegal immigrant, and he fled back to Mexico. So this young woman, that's Act 1 for her. Act 2 is she's trying to find this man. And I caught up with her during Act 2, and during the course of 6 months, I see her try every avenue, including writing to the President of the United States and meeting with him, to try to bring this guy back from Mexico to get justice for her family and for her husband. Act 3, just a stroke of fortune, during our filming time, they actually found the guy in Mexico and brought him back. So that was her Act 3, and completely unconstructed by me, but something that fits in that 3-act structure. And I was able to find those 3 acts, even in very, very small ways for these other characters. You might not think they were 3 acts, but they're actually 3 acts. Somebody else was a border agent who, in the beginning, I see him do his job, Lou Mejida. The crisis at the end of Act 2 is he actually gets assaulted by a vehicle. It's a vehicular assault on a federal agent by a coyote, a human smuggler. In Act 3, they find out who the guy is. So that was another 3-act arc. So you'll find these things in life as you follow characters around and create documentaries. You'll find your act structures. And in constructed or documentaries, in ones where you actually construct, you actually will make them. In The Fog of War again, Errol Morris is asking Robert McNamara to tell the story. But Morris knows when he's telling the story that there is a beginning and a middle and an end. And McNamara knows it too when he tells the story of his involvement with the Vietnam War. So, beginning, his involvement, what happened during the war, and what he thinks about it now. That's 3 acts. So I think you could find them, surprisingly, in almost any scenario.